I don't think yep, there we go. Just took a minute to catch up with itself, so. Let's see. That goes there. Okay. If you're late to class, if you're not setting by now, you have to bring donuts the next time. Oh.
That sounds good. I'd be late just to do that.
Just they have to be square donuts, right?
Those are expensive.
All donuts are expensive. Everything's expensive anymore.
Hertz.
Oh, Hertz donuts? Yeah, those are. Yeah, no, they don't give anything away. All right. Apparently somebody's bringing donuts next week. No. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's true happiness in the matrimony happiness. Yeah, what true statement there, Don. All right, when we last left, we were talking in Lectures of Faith 3, and so let's go back into Lectures of Faith 3. We were looking at, let's see here, let me get over to my right page. So we're talking about God's character, and in God's character, let's go to question 17. And we're talking about God's character, and we know that He is unchangeable. He's not a respecter of persons, which we've all agreed that those two are great things, because we don't want Him to be changeable. We don't want Him to be a respecter of persons, because of the fact that while we recognize authority, we recognize all that more than He does, and maybe even to a point of being unhealthy. I think we could recognize that. But it says, the question is it not also necessary to have the idea that God is merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and full of goodness? That's the question. Would we agree with that?
Especially the long-suffering, right?
Yeah, especially the long-suffering, right? And why is that, Janice? Is it because of...
Because you're probably not perfect.
No, I am the opposite of perfect. So if you're looking for perfect, just think of me opposite. So that's what that would be it. But that's true. See, that's one of the things that we would want. I guess I hate to say it that way, but that would be one of the things that we would want, is a long-sufferingness. Are you going to be able to get settled down?
Why am I a distraction to you?
Because you're beautiful.
Aww.
I'm getting breakfast at home. Pork sausage and eggs.
Yep.
Dennis.
Seems to me the long-suffering aspect of it indicates to us that God is engaged.
Yeah.
He just didn't create us all and wander off and then come back later and kind of see what's going on.
That's a great point, because he is engaged. He wants to know our part of what's going on in our lives, because how many times a day are we commanded to pray? Constantly, continually. And by the way, who are we praying to?
That's a good question.
Well, there's one answer. Or who should we be praying to? What, you think of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost? Yeah. But remember, which is one. All is one. And as we are one.
Yeah.
You'll explain that one next week.
Okay. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, there has been instances in the Bible when God was going to do away with His people, and they repented, and then He changed His mind, and it was mercy.
True, but the way you said that would imply a changeable God, and it isn't. Because what happened is the people were within sin, they repented, so they came back within the covenant. So He was following His own law. He was being who He is, because it wasn't as he changed his mind, the people changed their mind and aligned themselves up with the righteous, with what they were called to be. Right? I mean, really, yeah, because God doesn't change his mind. But Bruce, do you have your hand up?
I
Or?
was going to say, what he was saying, there's, you kind of pointed that out, is God didn't change his mind. The covenant extends, and as long as you are repentant and pursuing him, the blessings flow. But the unrepentant individual is condemned by God.
Right. Right.
So,
But it has to be because of the law, the
Right,
justice.
And so, there is no change in that regard of it. It's still the same for us today. If we're an unrepentant sinner, the sinner part we are. The unrepentant part, probably working on that some of us.
Well, but that's true. But that's a good point, Bruce. That's a very good point. Yeah. Yes, you. Yeah, Paul. I'm sorry. You're.
No, I mean, okay, so many times we're searching, I mean, no, when something serious happens, I'm sorry, when something serious is on.
Just look at the bottom. There you go.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Like, okay, for instance, like you're in a war.
Mhm.
Something happens, you're in a foxhole, okay, you, Lord, get me out of here, you pray to God, okay? Once things go good, you put God to the side,
Yeah.
and everything's going good, just like in life. You're poor, you make a little money, you're okay, you're living the wealthy part or whatever, then all of a sudden something tragic happens. Oh God, please help me again. But like you say, you gotta be constant. Every
Yeah.
morning, constant at work or whatever you're doing. But so many times we fall.
Yeah.
We fall.
We do. What's that? Oh, yeah, the different prayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
The different prayers. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it's easy to do because once we become comfortable, it's less top of mind. And the struggle is to become comfortable with God being top of mind. And it takes a little bit. And if you've ever tried it, just, if you're into trying different things, for a week, set aside a week and say, okay, like Paul, I know you pray every day, all day long, right? Over all kinds of things. Well, we're commanded to pray. So what I would do, just set yourself and say, okay, this week I'm going to pray before I leave the house, wherever I go. I'm going to pray, at my work, if you're going to work or whatever event. And it doesn't have to be a lengthy 13-minute dissertation. It can be, Lord, I'm going to church this morning. I pray that my journey is safe, along with everybody else's journey is safe. Boom. It doesn't have to be a long thing. But you see what happened then, not only are you praying, you've recognized God. And you've recognized his greatness in your life and in actions. Now, that doesn't mean you might not get in an accident on the way, but because you can't take away the agencies of others. Let's go, Bruce, you're going to say, then we got to go to Paul because you have the mic.
Okay, I just realized it was over here. Yeah, speaking of praying continually, and I may have shared this before, but I don't remember. There's a monastery on one of the Greek islands, and the monks there are known for praying constantly. They've even been observed praying in their sleep. Now, when Nazi Germany tried to take that island over, they were able to take everything but that monastery. They couldn't touch it. In fact, most of the soldiers, from the way the testimony goes, wouldn't even go near it.
All right.
So, they're planting their little seeds for their garden, and it's done with prayer. Every moment, they have a prayer on their heart, on their tongue, and in their mind.
All right. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it has to be prayer of sincerity, by the way.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Paul?
Well, is it wrong to be repetitive in
To
praying?
be repetitive.
I'm saying like our Father, okay, before I go to bed, I say our Father. When I get up in the morning, I say our Father. And then I go on and pray for us.
No, it's,
Because somebody says, don't be repetitive.
well, so what the scriptures say about repetitive prayer is the fact that it was a mechanical prayer. There was no feeling, there was no desire, there was no emotion behind it. It was like, well, you come out of a Catholic religion, so many times, it's automatic, right? Boom, we kneel, we're up. Well, not we, but I've been in there. Kneel up, and do the prayers have the emotion? See?
Say prayers today.
Yeah.
And I've been in, I'm saying
Yeah.
that. I'm 75 or
And you only look 70, Paul.
But it's still,
Yeah.
because when you go to a funeral,
Oh, yeah,
you go
yeah.
to mass.
But see, the difference becomes always, what is this doing? Yeah, what is the heart doing? You know, because I like the Lord's Prayer as it's given in the Scriptures. You know, many times if you don't know what to pray for, it's always good to pray the Lord's Prayer. You know, Lord, I mean, it covers all the bases. You're pretty well covered if you're saying the Lord's Prayer. Well, yes, Bruce.
That same,
Mr. Chapin, the microphone.
oh. It's been too long. Okay, there we go. I just got to get close now. That same attitude we have of prayer and having that depth of feeling when we do the Lord's Prayer and stuff, though, you know, I know we're talking about prayer, but it shouldn't stop there. All that we do should have that focus on God.
Right.
Even our day-to-day work, making that phone call to a supplier or something, that prayer, that Lord be glorified, that your successes, you know, bring praise and honor to Him and such, should be there.
Right.
And going back to what you said, you know, about try this exercise for a week. If you get through the first week, try it a second week. By the end of the third week, it'll be I don't want to call it a habit, but it'll be a practice.
A practice, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So if we take a look, and so we were talking about question 17, you know, that the idea that God is merciful, gracious, long-suffering. Part of that is the prayer and the recognition of who He is. If we look in question 18, the answer, and it talks about a little bit of everything that we just been talking about, because we can see in question 18a, what's 18AA? Who would read that? 18a. Yvonne?
Because of the weak,
It's on.
okay, because of the weakness and imperfections of human nature and the great frailties of man.
Wow, that is insightful, because to have that long suffering, it's like Dennis said, that he's engaged because we are weak and we are frail, and we have a few imperfections among us, and that happens, though, doesn't it? Well, without that long suffering and without the prayers, I think we would be lost. Because in B, oh yeah, Dennis? Okay, because in B it says, for such is the weakness of man and such his frailties. And what does that lead to? That he is liable to do what? Sin. Yeah. How often, Lana? Sin. That's what it says. You have to sin continually. And it says, if God were not long-suffering and full of compassion, gracious, merciful, and a forgiving disposition, what would happen to us? Yeah, cut off from the very presence. And by the way, that would have already happened because it would have happened really at the Garden of Eden, you know, and then we would all just be lost creatures, just kind of running amok, worse than what we do today. In C, in 18C, who would read that one for us? (18C). John?
In consequence of which he would be in continual doubt and could not exercise faith.
There you go. So, continual doubt and could not exercise faith. I think we see a lot of continual doubt today. And where there's doubt, you see doubt is an emotion. Faith is an emotion. I'm sorry?
It's Satan.
It can be, yeah. Yeah. Satan is not in control of everything, but he influences many things. Yeah. Because I can create doubt in each one of you if I wanted to. Yes, thank you. This must be the marriage counseling portion of the class.
Turns that way.
So-
My goodness.
So, first of all, I'd like to recruit Dennis as my lawyer. You can have Kioki.
I beat you, Dennis.
Bruce, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I believe it's 3 times Jesus called Satan the Lord of this world.
Yep.
And another time, he told Jesus, I will give you all these things in the world if you will fall down and worship me.
Yep.
That means that they really do belong to Satan at this time.
Yeah. You could read that. You could read into that.
But-
Go ahead.
But Satan, Jesus came to separate the wheat from the tares, the sheep from the goats, the good fish from the bad fish.
That's exactly right. No, that's a good point. So, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, hand in hand with what Bruce was saying, we also can consider, I think it's John 14, where it says, I go, the prince of this world cometh, that he hath not power over me, but he hath it over you.
Sure.
So, if we ain't got him on our side, we're in trouble.
Well, because look in 18D, what does it say in 18D?
For where doubt is, there faith has no power.
You realize how powerful that is? Where doubt is, faith has no power. And that is something that we need to really think about, because where doubt is, faith has no power. So if you've ever doubted, you have no faith, because it has no power. You may have the word faith, maybe have it stitched on your shirt somewhere, but it doesn't mean that you're exercising the faith. So what does that tell you about those moments that you would have doubt? What's that, Terry? You have no faith, but what?
You're weak in faith.
You're weak in faith. Now, does that mean that then doubt can forever overpower?
Faith can overcome doubt.
Exactly. So think about this. Doubt is darkness. Faith is light. Light will always overcome the darkness. Because right now, there's darkness in this room. If we were to turn the light out, we have the light on, we have light. It's that simple. Doubt is darkness. And should you ever doubt? Okay, doubt ourselves, but should we doubt the power and the promises of God? No. That's the doubt. Now, should I doubt Dawn sometimes? No. Never. I just got the look, ouch. But, what's that?
You ran out of courage.
I did. Did you see me just crumble right there at the end? Just bam, like that, just like an old piece of paper. But there are times, though, we should doubt certain things around us, because then doubt drives us, then doubt becomes a thing that drives us in prayer to help to understand. Because we've all experienced some kind of doubt.
But doubt is instinctual,
It is.
because if you wander around this world long enough, you're going to doubt a lot of things, and some of those doubts will save your life.
True, but so if you use doubt as a tool to exercise the faith in God, isn't that how it saves your life sometimes? Yeah.
Example.
But aren't you testing him?
Testing God?
Aren't you testing him?
I don't think so.
Well, if
I
you're
don't-
saying, okay, just say the devil's got doubt.
Oh,
The
sure.
devil's got doubt, okay, you're
Yeah.
doubting.
Yeah,
And you're waiting for the answer.
right.
It's not in your time, it's in God's time.
It is in God's time.
So let's say the devil says, see, he's not doing
Oh.
anything. So it builds up more and more doubt, and then you said where doubt is.
There's darkness. Yeah. Well, but I don't think it's really are you talking about testing God or testing Satan?
Well, I guess you're testing yourself.
Oh, true.
Because what happens is, you're trying to do the best you can. I mean,
Yep.
I'm just saying
Yep.
as an example. Because I have a brother-in-law that did this. He was in the Lord, but he wasn't in the Lord.
Right.
If all of it. He was reading the Bible and says, why ain't this happening? Why ain't this happening? So you got to read into it more. You got to put faith into it.
Mhm.
This is years ago. This is back in the 70s. And he just threw the Bible down and had no more to do with it to this day.
Yeah.
And it's sad. Yes.
So
because
doubt
everything-
overcame.
Because that's what he's living in, darkness.
Yeah.
And I try to tell him, but he will not.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't see the darkness, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, you see what you want to see.
Right.
And that's the devil
Yeah.
in your life.
Yeah. That's a great testimony. Yeah. So, Bruce?
Yeah, the passage that talks about not testing God is talking about asking for a sign as proof and such. Asking something in faith, whether for self or others, that's not testing him. That's, what's the word I want? Petitioning him. And we get kind of hung up on that word test with the way it's used in our modern language. It just simply means going over and over and over again, trying to get that sign and that proof.
Yeah.
Trying to get the right answers, and that again is an exercise of our doubt.
Right.
So it's like the repetitions. Vain repetitions versus repetitions.
Yep.
Two different things.
Exactly. That's a great point. Yes. In the microphone, please. So that's so everybody that's dialing in can listen, can hear. It's on.
Okay. So who was it? There was an individual in the Bible that did test God. Who was it that asked for the fleece to be either wet or dry?
Used to be
Was
whatever.
it Hezekiah? I don't remember. No.
I don't remember.
The general.
Gideon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did test God.
Gideon.
Gideon. So
Least of the tribe.
teacher, explain that one.
So I will have to go back and reread
Yeah.
that. So, but I remember portions of that scripture story, but it was testing God for a reason of faith, not his. If I remember that correctly, I'll go back and research that.
He doubted his ability to do what God was asking him.
Yes.
If God was really supporting him, then make the fleece wet.
Because he had the faith that God was there, he just didn't know that he had the ability to exercise.
So he asked him to do something, and God did it, and then he asked him to do the opposite.
Yep.
Make it dry,
Twice.
yeah.
And that may be one of those things you'll have to ask. If you ever see him, you'll have to ask him.
Yeah. Say, hey, by the way, what were you thinking? Bruce?
The television evangelists.
Oh, okay. We're not going there. No.
They're always preaching the prosperity gospel, and they're forgetting about all the. For example, during the Roman period, it's estimated that 5 million people were martyred. Now, 5 million equals the total population of Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. During the Papal Inquisition, 1,260 years, 50 million people were martyred. It's estimated that today, since the 1917, when communism started, they say that it's about 189 million people that have been martyred. And Billy Graham, when he was in China, he said that 63 million people were killed in China during the 60s, during the Red Guard Revolution. So when we speak about prosperity, we're forgetting about the hardships that people have endured, and they have endured it by praying and singing praises at night in the prison.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. So in 18E, when we look back in our lecture, because it ties right in with what we were talking about, that we're doubt and faith, and we're faith has no power over doubt. But who would read 18E for us then? 18E in the lecture. Oh, Yvonne, you gonna read that? Great.
But by man's believing that God is full of compassion and forgiveness, long-suffering, and slow to anger, he can exercise faith in him and overcome doubt, so as to be exceedingly strong.
So that talks about basically, Dennis, what you were saying, because of everything we talked here before about the fleece. It says that God is full of compassion. So he knew that God was full of compassion. Lord, I doubt myself, I don't doubt you, but because of your compassion, can you show me a couple of things? And that is so important when we see compassion, forgiveness, long-suffering, slow to anger. That builds our faith, knowing that you're never away from home. You can always come home no matter where you are. Just like, was your brother or brother-in-law? Which one was it? Brother-in-law. Even though he's away, he can still come home, right? Nobody is excluded from coming home. And that's the thing that we have to remember through all of this. That's how great God is, that we may see them as lost can be. And yet the Lord still knows where they're at. And that is the faith that we have to have, even those because there's so many we know that we believe are lost. Yes, Yvonne.
I mean, this is pretty elementary thing, but I was just going to say, I mean, everyone's faith develops in degrees. You know, we don't all of a sudden have a huge faith about something. It comes in degrees.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think just, you know, our life experiences as things happen to us, different crises or family problems, whatever it is, you know, as you pray for those and you see those things answered, you do just develop that faith.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
Kind of.
That's a great
I
point.
think everybody knows that.
Well, you know, while everybody may know that, it's always good to be reminded of that because we never know who. We all look great on the outside this morning because we're all dressed for church. How are we on the inside? You see, what burdens are you carrying today? And we can't see that from the outside, but the Lord knows that. And by just saying some of those simple things, you may have encouraged somebody's faith or strengthened it a little bit. I want to take you into the Book of Mormon and Alma, because it's going to support what we've been talking about, because even we have the lectures of faith, we've got all these questions, and then did it happen? Did people understand who God was, the justice, the mercy, the long-suffering? Was it recognized even before? When you get into Alma 19, and you got to go Alma 19, we're going to jump around here just a little bit, but verse 75 is where we're going to start. And I'll read the first verse in 75 to get us started here. And now, my son, all men that are in a state of nature, or I would say in a carnal state, are in the gall of bitterness and bonds of iniquity. They are without God in the world. They have gone contrary to the nature of God. Therefore, they are in a state contrary to the nature of happiness. I think we'd all agree with that. If you're contrary to God, you're probably, while you may be emotional, there's different levels of happiness. There's emotionally happy. You know, I'm happy when Terry brings cheesecake to potluck, right? But that's not an eternal happiness. That's not an eternal joy. That is as long as it lasts in my bowl, then the happiness is gone. Okay, so we see that this eternal happiness, and we can see what it is that nature of happiness. Now, that doesn't mean that the world is full of rainbows and unicorns, but it means that as we see the nature of God, that we can maintain happiness even through the dark side. Very tough to do. That came out so easy, but we all know that that's hard to do. So what is this nature of happiness that we talk about here, just very briefly? What do you think that is? Bruce? And we're going to talk about the nature of happiness. No evangelical TV shows.
Well, there's the Bible speaks of people like the waves of the ocean being blown to and fro by the wind, and that's the way most people are. They go through life reacting automatically to good things and bad things, but true happiness is the ability to be like Paul when he was singing and praising God when he was in prison.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's where I was going to go, that when Paul was in prison, They, and any of the they did not see darkness or unhappiness. They saw joy. And by the way, what was? Hopefully you know this. What was Paul's joy? Why was he so joyful?
Preaching the word of God.
Okay, he was preaching the word of God, Yvonne.
Well, he knew that his suffering counted for good.
That's
and-
exactly right. All of those were tied in. See, even though he was bound naked in chains, he knew he was doing it because of his love of God. Dennis?
He could be psychotic and do that.
Well, true. We would assume he's not.
I think what he ultimately knew was he had an absolute assurance of eternal life
Exactly.
in Christ.
So he was able,
He saw through the veil
he,
somehow.
he saw through the veil. He was able to see the ultimate goal, that light that was set on top of a hill. And when we see that and we stay focused on that, it's like when we talk, the scripture where I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Those are all the bad things that are happening in your life. They're just beaten down, beaten down, beaten down. But you never stop walking. It's like the rod of iron, to the tree of life. It's a pathway, right? You never stop walking. You continue, because once you stop, what happens if you stop? You slip and fall. You become like Paul's brother-in-law. You fall into the darkness, right? You give up.
I have a question in regard to when Paul was Saul, and Dennis was saying that and you guys were talking about like seeing through the veil. Do you think when he was blinded that God showed him all these things and there was absolutely no doubt?
I think when he was blinded, God showed him himself.
Yeah, he was able to answer your question.
See who he was, otherwise
That's why he was in prison.
how he saw, I think, was, we don't know what happened to him when he was in the wilderness, in wherever he was,
Right.
Sinai,
Sinai,
or wherever he
yeah.
was, I forget where he was. For what, 5, 6 years?
Mhm.
Or longer?
It was 3 years,
He
yeah.
was blinded for 3 years.
No.
Oh,
He was then, I think he went to Jerusalem and
Mhm.
tried to make up, and they were a little suspicious, and then they sent him off into the wilderness, which is Sinai or someplace,
Oh.
where he was, it doesn't say what he did, because it's not important to know, for us to know what he did, but he came to an accurate, complete understanding of who he was and what he was supposed to do and who Christ was.
Right.
Do you believe that that was the same thing when Alma, for 3 days, and he became, and King Limhi, and even his
Yeah.
wife? I mean, I believe that yes, they were able. That's why they have no doubt. It was 100% conviction,
Mhm.
because they were shown things that, like you said, beyond the veil.
But we're all able to see that if we put ourselves into that place. But go ahead,
Whether he saw it,
please.
temporarily, or whether we saw it spiritually, more important, we saw it spiritually.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, the Spirit will change your body. It will change your whole purpose. Yvonne, you got your hand up?
I was just going to say, I think if I remember right, I said he was in the gall of bitterness. And so he saw what was going to happen to his soul. Yeah. When he, if he would have continued on, he saw where he was going and how awful that was. And so that's why he became such a turnaround for him, because he did not want to go there, and he didn't want anybody else to either. And so that's why he just latched on to, being one of the biggest missionaries ever, because he did not want to go there, and he had such a passion to keep others from going there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go, Bruce.
Yeah, it's something that we tend to forget in the story of Paul is even when he was still Saul, he had faith in God. And what God revealed unto him, as was said, is where he was on that path, and that his faith was not misplaced, but his methods were.
Right.
And God revealed to him then the risen Christ, and et cetera, through the series of events, I think. But I think the blindness time and that time alone exactly, you're right. He was having himself revealed as where he was in comparison to where God wanted him to be and where he could be.
Yeah, and those are great stories, whether they are in the New Testament, whether they're in the Book of Mormon. But many have experienced those things when you're able to see literally beyond the veil, and you do a self-analysis of, ooh, this is really where I'm at. So yeah,
It's interesting with Paul. Now, he was the poster child for a biblical student, right?
Mhm.
He was the penultimate. And yet, he could probably recite a lot of or most of the scriptures by heart, and yet he didn't understand them.
right.
And if you read in Acts, he was blind. He was blind for 3 days, and when he got his sight, I think it says he almost instantly went into the synagogues and through the scriptures and Moses. Sounds like a road to Emmaus.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does. Yeah.
Prove that to those people listening to him that Christ was the Messiah. Now,
Yeah.
why didn't he make that connection before?
Because he didn't have the light.
He didn't have the light. He didn't
Yeah.
understand.
He had the knowledge. He didn't have the understanding. Yes, Bruce.
There's a verse that says, it's better not to know Christ than to know him and leave him. And I believe the background of that saying was that there were Christians who went back to animal sacrifice and things in the temple. Now today, over television, they're making collections from Christians to donate to the Jews so that they can build a temple and start sacrificing animals again.
Yeah, that could very well be. There's there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the world for sure. Yeah, so let's go back to Alma 19, because as we read verse 75, I want to take us to verse 78, and this is where the understanding starts to come from. Now, you got to realize, we're talking about the lectures of faith and merciful, long-suffering God. What is being told here in what is Alma saying, and who would read verse 78 for us? Alma 19:78. John?
Therefore, my son, see that ye are merciful unto your brethren, deal justly, judge righteously, and do good continually. And if ye do all these things, ye shall receive your reward.
Okay, that's the first part of it, isn't it? So you see there was an understanding even then from Alma. Alma's trying to teach his son, and so it becomes a teaching event. So this is who God is. Alma saw, hey, this is who God is. Do you realize then, as you set through these classes and we delve deeper into this, you understand who God is, and then what are you to do? What's your calling and commission, Bruce?
I think it's interesting that the two verses before that
Yeah,
provide a definition of restoration,
right.
and then this verse tells him what he needs to do in order to be restored.
Exactly.
So I find that interesting because evil can only restore evil, good can only restore good, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's another poignant thought for us to consider.
Well, then could you read, since you have the mic, verse 79 for us then, because that's where we're going to go next.
You shall have mercy restored to you again, you shall have justice restored to you again, and you shall have a righteous judgment restored to you again. How wonderful.
Yeah. So you see those blessings as they come through, but it's like we were talking about. You got to hit it every day. You can't just pull it off the shelf like a salt and pepper or something like that. You want to add it to spice your food up that day. That doesn't work. It has to be a part of your daily diet. And that's what Alma is trying to teach his son here. But understand, he's teaching him the same characteristics that God has. And you have to put that in perspective. So let's ask this question then. Can you deal justly with each other?
Sure.
Okay. Will you?
Depends on if it's to my advantage or not.
There you go. Can you judge righteously? Mark needs a microphone. Can you judge righteously? You can. You can. You can judge righteously to your knowledge. Mark, you got a comment?
Were you going to go into 81 at all?
Yeah, eventually get down there. Go. Oh,
Never thought.
Mark, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I found it kind of interesting. Can I just read it? Or?
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead. That's where we're going next. So.
And now, my son, I perceive that there is somewhat more which doth worry your mind, which ye cannot understand, which is concerning the justice of God in the punishment of the sinner. For you do try to suppose that it is injustice that the sinner should be consigned to a state of misery.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the way I was at least taking that first glance is to not simplify things to an easy believism gospel. There's consequences for doing good. There's consequences for doing bad.
Right.
Simply put.
Yeah, and that's the justice of God, the judgment of God that we read. That's a characteristic. But what the blessing is what we just read prior to that is the mercy. There's mercy. Can you have mercy upon people? Do you?
Sometimes.
Okay, sometimes.
I'll be honest.
Yeah. No, that's good. We got to be honest with ourselves. If we're not honest with ourselves, then we can't be honest with God.
I have more hard time loving, the people that didn't help me yesterday when they saw I was struggling
True?
with that huge box.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like, and I was rude.
You're looking at me.
No, she was telling me that she was relating the story when I got home. Yeah, I was gone, so.
And,
Yeah.
and I told the man, I was rude when he, after he saw me struggling,
Yeah.
because he could have helped me and he did not.
Yeah. It's a lesson for all of us.
Well,
No, but it is. It
but
truly
we're
is.
supposed to love those people.
You still have to love them because you see the outside, you don't know the inside.
I know.
That's the thing that God loves about us the most is not what's outside but what's inside. Right.
But I know.
Keep going.
It was when I finally got through the door with that huge box, while he stood there watching me and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Apparently not." I mean, that to me,
Yeah.
he was showing what was on the inside because he just stood there,
Yeah.
And,
That could very well
and
be.
then what I showed that was on the inside was rudeness.
Yeah. That's part of the probationary period. I guarantee you that, and we're not going to have a show of hands, but we were probably ornery to somebody this last week, somewhere. I guarantee you. So.
And we got to remember that loving others doesn't mean we have to be happy with their actions.
No, that's true.
No,
That's
I
right.
know that,
But,
but
That's
yeah,
right.
but I know what you're saying,
But-
and you know what a wonderful confession for a communion Sunday.
Yeah. All right, we've got a few folks that need to use the mic, so let's go to Mark, and then Paul, and then, was it Bruce? Okay, so let's start with Mark.
I was just going to try to bring it back full circle with when you mentioned righteous judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And with back to 75 about you really can't do righteous judgment unless you're in this unnatural state.
Right.
And that's that state of the of happiness. And if you're in that state and you're doing that righteous judgment, it's going to be a judgment with mercy, dealing that justly in that, seeking out that good. You're not going to be harsh and, quick to snap. That's not going to be the nature of that.
Right, right. That, and when you were saying that, that reminds me of the woman that was going to be stoned, right? He condemned, those that had the stone, and what was his counsel to the woman?
Go and sin no more.
Go thy way, sin no more. Simple,
simple words, but not, I was gonna say, not simple to do.
Okay, well, we got to go to Paul, and then we got to go. We're going to go here.
Okay, through all this, and what God judged you by what you know or what's in your heart. Okay, so you have the Catholic, you have the Protestants, you have all these religions, and you're taught, unless you dig more into it. Say like a Catholic, they tell you this, they read that. Nobody reads the Bible. I'm just saying. So they live their life the best they can by the way they're taught.
Right.
So if they seek no more, to seek further into the Lord, Are they judged by what they're taught, or they're judged for falling short?
I think mercy trumps justice there. I really do, because the Lord understands that we love tradition. People as a people, we love tradition. We like things cha-chunk, cha-chunk, cha-chunk. And I truly believe that there's mercy there. So I really do. Let's go to Bruce, because we're running out of time.
Over in India, if you go on a tour of a Christian tour, the driver is told not to, told to completely avoid going near Hindu temples because of the extremely immoral pictures and signs, and they have wagons with prostitutes going out into the country, but yet there's a teacher there who said all sin is some sort of a cruelty, and truth is truth, no matter where you find it.
Yep.
Ten Commandments, every one of the 10 Commandments, you can trace back to either cruelty to God or cruelty to your fellow men.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Well, class is over. Next week we're going to continue on a little bit in Alma 19 in the 70s and early 80s, not his years, but as in verses. So we'll go from there.